You're listening to the Fitzrock Podcast, interviews where we explore the shifts and transitions of life. Here are your hosts, Keith Rock and Don Fitzsimmons. Hey, everybody. Tonight I just want to talk about a guy that I've met recently. You know, every once in a while you run into someone who just truly inspires you. And that has been my experience with this person. A lot of you know that I'm in a wheelchair, and in the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've been having to go to physical therapy and occupational therapy. And he just does a lot of stuff. He plays rugby. He's worked with the NFL actually to start a wheelchair football team. He plays basketball. He plays softball. But one of the more inspiring things that he does is somehow he got it in his head that even in a wheelchair, he could be an occupational therapist. And so he did that. And this is a man who doesn't see barriers. He just sees a challenge to be overcome. So really excited, Tom, to hear your story. His name is Tom Knaus. Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you guys for having me.
Hi, Tom. Hey, just thought we'd start out with, tell us a little bit about yourself and like your journey.
Okay. I grew up in Sedalia, Missouri. I grew up on a farm in Sedalia, Missouri. So I was working on the farm at a young age. I worked on the farm pretty much full time while I was in high school. I played sports while I was in high school too. I played football, I played basketball. Those are my two main sports. I wasn't great at sports, like I wasn't an all-star or anything. I just liked the competition. The competition was a nice alternative to working on the farm. But I loved working on the farm too. My childhood was great. Like I can't complain anything at all about my childhood. I had two great parents. When I was 18, I was at a friend's house. It was at a party. I was drinking with friends, and I fell off of her deck. So like I leaned against a deck railing, and it gave out, and I fell like 20 feet, and I broke my neck. So I broke I dislocated my neck. My C7, which is the last bone of your neck, went one way, and the T1, which is the first bone in your back, went the other way. And that severed the spinal cord, and it paralyzed me from about the chest down. I have a little bit of feeling, no movement right below my chest. So after that happened, like that's obviously a big life-altering event. I went to rehab in Columbia, Missouri for 2 months, and then I finished high school. And then that summer, the accident happened in winter. So that following summer, I did outpatient therapy in Sedalia, Missouri, my hometown, occupational and physical therapy. And then that fall, I started at the University of Missouri in Columbia. So that forced me to be independent right away after my injury. While I was at the University of Missouri, I was getting out of my car one day, going back to my dorm, and somebody in a wheelchair stopped me and asked me if I wanted to play wheelchair basketball. And I didn't know it, but it was the coach of the wheelchair basketball team. So he talked me into coming out to practice. And I mean, at first, when someone asks you to play a wheelchair sport, I think this is a lot of people's feeling, is like, when people say wheelchair sports, you don't think of like very competitive and like challenging and you don't think it's going to be like a quote unquote normal sport. But I'm thankful that I did go to that practice, and I learned that it was very challenging, and I got my butt kicked for a couple hours the first day, and then for months and months and months after that, I kept going back. And so about like 2 or 3 weeks into it, I realized that there was only 5 people at practices. And like, so I was going to have to play right away. So the collegiate wheelchair basketball division is probably is one of the hardest divisions of wheelchair basketball in the country. There are 5 or 6 colleges that have wheelchair basketball programs, and they're all very competitive. So we were practicing every morning, and I got thrown into the fire that first year. And I mean, I was bad, and I got better throughout the year, but I still wasn't good. But I've stuck with playing wheelchair basketball, and I've gotten a little bit better every year. And I really enjoy it. I still play wheelchair basketball. I've been playing for 15 years, really since I got injured. I played for Mizzou for 5 years. I was actually a part of Mizzou's inaugural team. So like that year I was there was the first year they had a wheelchair basketball program. And then after my 5 years of eligibility was up at Mizzou, a friend of mine from the Kansas City area started a wheelchair basketball team with a lot of the Mizzou graduates. And that wheelchair basketball team is still in existence today, and I play some for it. I don't play as much wheelchair basketball anymore. But so I moved to Kansas City. I found rugby. I found softball. I really enjoy playing rugby. That's my main competitive sport that I still play right now. And we've just started a football team. So a friend of mine was in charge of really developing like there's only 4 teams. The NFL gave 4 cities a bunch of money to create a wheelchair football league. And so representatives in each of those 4 cities got together and like made rules and really put this whole sport together. And we've just started practicing that a little bit this year. With COVID, we didn't practice much, but we got to see a little bit what it's like, and it's a lot of fun. Other things about me. So I obviously play a lot of wheelchair sports, but I'm also an occupational therapist. I didn't know that I wanted to be an occupational therapist really until I'd already graduated and I was working full time anyways. So that first 5 years I was at Mizzou, I was working on a business degree. It was a business finance degree, and I worked in finance for a year or 2. It was like a year and a half, and the last half of the year I was taking prereqs because I knew I wanted to do something else. But working in finance, I realized right away that I really didn't want to do that. So I was lucky enough to get help from vocational rehabilitation, which is a state-funded program that helps people with disabilities get back to work, and they'll pay for schooling a lot of times. So while I was working in finance, I got to think a lot about like what I would really enjoy doing for an occupation. And I finally decided that like I really wanted to use my knowledge of being disabled to help like other people as much as I could. And working in finance, like I didn't get that opportunity. So I thought that
pushback from anyone about wanting to be an occupational therapist.
Yeah, I did. I knew of people through adaptive sports that were therapists. Like I knew of at least one person that was a physical therapist. But he had a lot more function than I did. Like he was more of like a waist down injury. He had a lot more trunk control than I did. But yeah, absolutely. I got a lot of pushback. Even when I got into occupational therapy school, um, like I was never told I couldn't be an occupational therapist in school, but like there was a lot of times there was conversations about like, well, it would be easier for you to be maybe work in the mental health setting because it doesn't require as much physical interaction, um, things like that. Um, and I mean, I think that working in that field would be appropriate, but I really wanted to work with individuals that had neurological injuries like myself. Um, so I finally decided on occupational therapy, and it was a great decision. Like I love it. I really do enjoy my job. I get to work at a great facility. It's Ability KC in Kansas City. It's a nonprofit, so it's not like a huge hospital, and we just get a lot of freedom there. And it's a great place to work. I'm very happy that I went back to school and and chose occupational therapy. Mhm.
When you had your injury, as a teenager, most of the time when we're teenagers, we think we're pretty invincible.
Mhm.
What was your initial response to that emotionally?
It was, I think initially, um, it was just shock. Like I didn't know what to expect. Like everybody thinks that they're going to walk again after they have a spinal cord injury, and I really didn't get any movement back. So I knew that I was probably not going to walk, and the shock kind of turned into um, like anger, and like I was angry at first. Um, I got angry at my parents a lot, and then it was a lot of just like it went from like anger to probably indifference. Like I just wanted to do things that my friends were doing. So like I did a lot of like going out with friends and drinking and um, partying and things like that, just to kind of and that wasn't really me addressing the issue. It was just like me trying to do things do things to not think about it. Um,
Kind of an escape.
yeah. Um, but I mean, eventually, I mean, I say eventually because I mean, I was in the escape mode for probably my whole uh, first 5 years of college. Wheelchair sports helped immensely, but I was still like going out partying and doing a lot of things that I probably shouldn't have been doing.
Were you
Um,
always were you always a competitive person?
yeah, I was always from a young age. I played basketball from a young age, and I enjoyed competition. Um, so yeah, I was always competitive. Yes, I got to a point where I realized that the escaping wasn't helping me at all. Like I needed to do things that I enjoyed and that I I was happy about. Like that it made me happy. That made me feel like a good person. Um, and going out and partying, like I never felt good after that. Like I felt good in the moment. Like it's fun. It's great in the moment. But like that next day, you're just like, oh, why did I do that?
Yeah.
Um, so like I really sat down and like thought about like what makes me feel good about myself, and it's just like adaptive sports was a huge one. Um, Helping people was another one. That's why I chose occupational therapy. Those are really my main two things that I get the most out of. So that's what I really wanted to focus on.
So when you go to work every day as an occupational therapist, do you face barriers that you feel like others wouldn't? Or do you even think in those terms?
Um, I honestly, I don't even think of those terms anymore. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I do face barriers. Like I can't pick up, I can't have certain clients because, like, if somebody really well, so it's more difficult for me to have certain clients. Like, I'm not going to say I can't pick them up, or like when I say pick them up, I mean I can't take them on as a client. Um, like it's going to be more difficult for me to get somebody from their wheelchair to a mat that needs a maximum assist transfer. Um, but there are ways for me to do it, and I have done it. Like we have electric lifts, electric Hoyer lifts that allow me to transfer people if I really need to. Um, luckily, a lot of the time there's somebody there that can just help me if I need to do that. But what is really good about Ability KC is that it's a lot of times people have been injured a while before they go there. So a lot of the times they will be able to transfer themselves already, or we're working on things that don't require a transfer. That's like the big barrier for me is like transferring people. Just I had to work when I was actually a student there before I started working there. And my mentor, my supervisor that I worked with was really good at like having me take time to learn how to adapt things to myself. So like what I mean by that is like I can do like range of motion on somebody's arm, and I can do pretty much everything that other occupational therapists do. I just have to figure out another way to do it. Like I have to figure out how to position my wheelchair. I have to figure out how to position myself to be successful at certain tasks. And once I did that, things got a lot easier, and it's just second nature now. I don't think it's gotten to the point where I just go about my day and I really don't think about the barriers. And if I would have told myself that I wasn't thinking about the barriers, like whenever I first got injured, I would have laughed at myself.
Yeah, my guess is, and you kind of alluded to this, but at some point you probably had a really hard conversation with yourself, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I had a lot of really hard conversations with myself. My parents had a lot of really hard conversations with me too. They helped me see that I could be much better than I was. I could be a better person than I was being.
Did you ever think about, well, what happens if I don't do this? What if I don't challenge myself to be better? What will that be like for me?
I mean, I did. I absolutely thought about that. I mean, I thought I saw myself going down just like a negative path, and I didn't want that. That's why I chose to do those things that made me feel more positive. It's just like I just felt like I had to take the more positive path that would lead to a much better outcome.
Mm-hmm. I have a question that just popped into my head here. Keith and I have kind of a mutual friend who is also in a wheelchair. And she posts a lot of times about that she gets offended when people offer to help her and things like that. because I think that it comes across as, well, we don't think that you can do this. I, on the other hand, am more like, if you want to offer, like, I'm good with you being kind. So you've worked with a lot of people in wheelchairs, and plus you have your own perspective. What advice would you give to somebody who, like, isn't in a chair but doesn't quite know how to interact with those of us who are?
I mean, I think that, I mean, people in wheelchairs are a lot like people that aren't in wheelchairs. So I think some people do need help doing things, and some people don't. But I think that just by looking at them, a lot of times you can tell if they need help and if they don't. So if their body language is showing that they need help, then ask them if they need help. I do think it's important to ask first, and not just go in and help them without asking.
Right.
But I would have a lot of times when I first got injured, I would get annoyed when people would ask to help me. And I mean, sometimes I do, but it's really more of just what my feelings in the moment. I realize that when someone asks me if I need help, I realize that they're just trying to be helpful. And sometimes I say that I do need help, and sometimes I don't. But I think it's really annoying when people just like come up and try to push you, or don't ask.
Yeah.
So I think the main thing I would tell people is just, if you think they need help, ask them. And if they do, they will tell you. And if they don't, they will tell you. And just don't be offended if they don't need your help.
So don't assume, check it out. I know you were telling me the other day about that there's kind of an art to pushing someone in a wheelchair. And it took me a minute to, like, well, I think I even asked you, what do you mean? But yeah, tell the audience what you told me.
So whenever someone else pushes someone in a wheelchair, you have to know how to push a wheelchair. You have to be very aware of the surroundings. So in my college days, when I would be out partying, a lot of times people would come up and just try to push me. And sometimes I wouldn't say anything. I just let them push me. But a lot of times those people don't know how to push someone in a wheelchair. And so you have to be very aware of if there's any bumps in front of you, especially if that person isn't wearing a seatbelt. So one time somebody was pushing me, actually this happened several times, but one time somebody was pushing me, and it was across a street, like a crosswalk. And they hit a pothole and dumped me out of my wheelchair right in the middle of the intersection. And it was right whenever the light turned green, so that the oncoming traffic was coming right at me. So, I mean, that's an extreme example. But I mean, it was a scary moment, and I'm glad I could move pretty fast to get out of the way.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
What's been the most challenging thing that you've had to face of all the challenges you went through?
I think the most challenging thing revolves around like having the right mindset. So like having a positive mindset in the beginning was really challenging for me. And like I would just be down on myself all the time. Mainly because like when you're first injured, well, even a lot of people years after their injury, think of disability as like a very negative thing. They think of it like I was ashamed. I felt like I was a burden to people. I just felt a lot of negative emotions. And eventually I just started, I tell people that I tricked myself into thinking positive. So like when I would think a negative emotion, I would try to catch myself and then like think a positive emotion instead of that. And it sounds corny and it sounds like a cliche, but it really did help me be more positive and like think more positively. And it really did help mentally.
Yeah, how did you get over? Because I still struggle with this, of feeling
I do
like a
too.
burden, the whole
I do
feeling
too.
like a burden thing to those around me.
It, I just feel like you have to realize that you can only change the things that you can change. Like there's some things you cannot change, and you cannot be ashamed, or you can't make those things that you can't change affect you negatively, because you can't change them. It's absolutely easier said than done, and I still have negative emotions all the time. But I try to catch myself, and I try to put that into practice.
Inspiring, just all the different things and challenges you face. That's pretty incredible.
So yeah, Tom, thanks for being with us. And if there is anyone who is listening who struggles or who has had some kind of a neurological injury, this ability KC plays, not just Tom, but all the people there who have worked with me, it's just amazing. They are equipped to deal with the hard cases. A lot different than like the kind of strip mall physical therapy folks who do a great job but don't have the equipment that they need to do to work with folks who have these kind of injuries. So thanks, Tom, so much, not only for what you do for everybody else, but me particularly, and for being with us tonight and sharing your story. And we're just very grateful.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fitz Rock Podcast. The music you are hearing is Swim with Wild Musical Instruments by Your My Muse. Copyright 2019 and licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial License. Until next time, have a fantastic life.